I was making a speech in Kansas City the other night when the temperature was 9 below zero. And they had 5 speakers. Paul Harvey, Art Linkletter, Zig Ziglar, and myself, and a man named Douglas Snarr, S-N-A-R-R, a very successful businessman. The other night, I sat in the audience with Mrs. Peale and Gene Akers, and I listened to Douglas Snarr speak to 10,000 people at 9 below zero. And he fascinated them. He lifted them up. One of the greatest speeches I ever listened to in all my life.
I'm with Doug Snarr, and it's December 8, 2021. And I've asked Doug to tell me about his story of when he met Norman Vincent Peale, and he told him his story about him meeting the prophet.
Norman Vincent Peale was my favorite person to listen to when he would give a speech. And he gave speeches all over. And he was a man whose philosophy, Christianity, was based a great deal upon the phenomenon of positive thinking. And he had hired one of the country's most valid experts on the subject to work full-time for him, or with him. And so he relocated to New York. And Peale worked out of New York, Marble Arch Church in Manhattan. Now, the demands on him were great to speak all over. And he was very much an expert. He had mastered, I believe, the language. But more important than that, his ability to pronounce the words in a manner in which you get every syllable in the word. I found myself speaking with positive thinking rallies. I spoke at about 5, and he also spoke. He usually went first. I followed Paul Harvey, and then generally Zig Ziglar or others like Earl Nightingale followed me, and then some beyond that. So I was stationed in the middle. But to the shock of everybody, but mostly myself, the crowd seemed to respond to me in greater emphasis. And I think because of that, he stayed to hear me speak, because he had heard what some of the other speakers were saying about me. And he wanted to hear me. He did. And from that, a breakfast was arranged where it'd be the two of us having breakfast together. Now he asked me the question, "You're from Salt Lake City. I assume that you're a Mormon, is that right?" And I said, "It is true. It is right." And he says, "I want to tell you a story about myself and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. but more importantly, the power of Jesus Christ himself through the church and what's happened, which frankly is miraculous. So he said that he became very ill, and he went to doctors in New York, and he went to other places, Mayo Clinic, for example, and they couldn't locate the problem, nor could they locate a solution for the problem. But it was killing him. And he was told that he would die and that there was no way out, and to prepare himself and his church and all that's involved and the many people that help him organize it and to find a replacement for himself. Now he said, I came to the conclusion that if I were to be saved, it would take divine intervention. And divine intervention would only be located where the priesthood was. And the only people on earth that have the priesthood is found within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so with that, in desperation, in effect, but in a strong belief that, let's say, I being a member of the church, we have the priesthood and the power thereof. Now, and so with that, he phoned the president of the church, who was David O. Mckay, and asked him if he would give him a blessing that he would live longer and to be able to fulfill his purpose on this earth. And it was arranged. He flew from New York to Salt Lake City. An apostle was there to greet him and to bring him to the administration building of the church, which is made up of only apostles and the first presidency. Now, and certain others. And he said that when he got there and got out of the car, up the steps, and as he went through the building, he felt a phenomenon that he had never felt before in the context of entering into any other building. And in that, the feeling was light. If we can use light as a feeling, the sun gives us feeling, the moon gives us feeling, both emanate light. Stars give us feeling, and their light is different one from the other. So there's degrees of intensity. But he felt this light unlike any other building, and it was more positive. With that, he then was ushered into the office complex where President David O. Mckay was located. And there was another man there. Now he says, I can't remember his name, but there was another man there with him. And I said, was it U.B. Brown? He said, yes, it was U.B. Brown. You're right. And he said, explain to me the process would be that we will use consecrated olive oil, which has been blessed for the purpose of the healing of the sick. And so that was explained to me. And that Hugh B. Brown would then anoint me with the oil. He would apply the oil to the crown of my head and then give me an anointment. Now that would be a blessing I discovered was shorter and to the point. But the emphasis was that the words spoken of in the sealing would be realized. That was his prayer. Praying for the words of the sealing to be realized. And so then, President Mckay put his hands on my head directly, and President Brown put his hands over and on President Mckay. Now, when that happened, it was like degrees. I walk in the building, I feel something that I've never felt before. I go into the office complex, and that's an enlargement and of the phenomenon that I felt when I came in the building. It was of the same nature, but the difference was intensity. But then when Hugh B. Brown put his hands and anointed me, I felt something go clear through my body in a manner that I can't describe. And he said, I knew that they had the priesthood. I knew that if I was to be healed, it would take place today. So I explained that to me. He was very humble. We stopped eating as he started to talk around that breakfast table. The conversation transcended the delicacy of the food. And then when President Mckay spoke, then I knew and felt as if I were in the presence of God. And he blessed me. He told me the Lord was pleased with the work that I was doing. I was bringing a lot of people into a knowledge of the importance of Jesus Christ, who is the one and true God. Of course, we know that there are three in the Godhead, but he only referenced Christ. And he blessed me that this disease or aberration that was destroying my life and would bring my work to an end would be removed, and that I would live for several more years. I was encouraged to continue to do the work that I was doing, and that in the next life I would receive the priesthood. And so I move forward with zeal, confidence, and the deepest of gratitude and love for our Savior. But that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints indeed was. Now, when it ended, I felt kind of like a lump. I'd had a certain amount of strength was engulfed within the strength of the Lord, that I would be healed. So I had to exercise my faith, not only to get there, but to be there and to believe the words and to defend the church when possible. And when needed. So he thanked me for the breakfast, joining him. I was grateful. I thanked him for being there with me, and that the blessing meant a lot to me. It was just further evidence of what I have known since a child, a young child at that. And it was true. For as a young boy, I'm about 4 or 5 years of age, my grandmother on my mother's side sat me on her knee and told me the Joseph Smith story pursuant to the first vision. I knew it was true. I've never doubted, and I've never looked back. I've looked forward to see what I could accomplish with that knowledge. Gratitude of her telling me the greatest story on this earth, with the exception of Adam and Eve themselves, Jesus Christ, and now Joseph Smith. Thank you.